This chapter, chapter 33, is titled Mantra. Or if you want to be an American, mantra. We're learning about mantras, y'all. November 1998. I woke up early, long before the alarm went off at 4:30 in the morning. The excited beat of my heart, despite the early hour, and despite the fact that I'm not a morning person, reminded me of waking up on Christmas mornings. Having a decorated Christmas tree and surrounding its base with presents is an inextricable part of American life, regardless of if one is Christian or not. My goodness, could you imagine voluntarily waking up at 4:30 in the morning that happy? Only by Christmas 1983, this is 15 years prior, when I was 12 years old, 3 months before my bat mitzvah, did I question whether observant Jews should be celebrating Christmas with such vigor. Till then, it had been an unquestioned given. The excitement of knowing that the day would be filled with gifts pulled me from slumber at dawn. Today, in India, while the sense of excitement was similar and my heart beat with the same anticipatory joy, the presents wouldn't be wrapped in paper and tied with bows. Today, I was receiving a mantra. Wow, that is something very, very sacred that we're going to be made a part of by reading this. I'm sure that our dear author will tell us about what that means, but I'll give you a little context. When you're ready, and sometimes it may take years until then, a guru may give you a mantra just for you and no one else, specially designed with the precise spiritual phonetics to bring about your realization. Not all traditions do this, but it is very traditional in tantric and yogic traditions of India. Today, she is receiving a mantra. It was Thursday, November 26th, 1998, Thanksgiving morning. The auspicious date was chosen not by the science of Vedic astrology, but by my Western sentimental sensibility. Also, Thursdays in the Hindu tradition are dedicated to the Guru. Each day of the week is named after and dedicated to a particular manifestation of the divine. Thursday is called Guruvar in Hindi, the day of the Guru. Thus, Thanksgiving, always celebrated on a Thursday, seemed the perfect day to get a mantra. I had been asking Swamiji for a mantra for nearly 2 years, since I had heard him speak about its power. That a mantra is the master key to stilling the mind and achieving an expanded state of consciousness. I wanted a mantra immediately, but he wouldn't give me one. Just wait, he said. Would the alchemical power of the Sanskrit sound be too much for my consciousness, the boundaries of which were already melting into the world around me? Was my experience still too fragile to be able to handle the additional energy? My psyche was a crucible, already cooked and cracked by the fire of the experiences I was having. Would a mantra shatter the vessel irreparably? Or was he worried about what my parents would think? I'm not sure why it took him 2 years to agree to give a mantra, whether it was careful, deliberate titration of my spiritual progress, or whether he was simply hesitant to initiate an American Jewish girl into the rites of an ancient Vedic culture. My inquiries into the reason for the delay were no more successful than my entreaties for the mantra itself had been. The answer, however, went from no to yes around the 20th month of asking. love the word choice of titration to describe it. As anyone who's ever taken a chemistry class will know, that's all you do in chemistry. Titration, titration, titration. Where you isolate the essence of some distillation. I did not allow Swamiji's withholding of my mantra to prevent me from trying to reap its benefits. If he wouldn't give me one, I'd make one up. After all, Swamiji always emphasizes the importance of devotion and sincerity over rote recitation. His lectures are filled with stories, scriptural, historical, and apocryphal, of God's preference for sincerity over expertise, for love over ritual, for spirit of the heart over spirit of the law. His favorite story is of a boy who, not yet knowing the complex invocations, recited the alphabet during the time of silent prayer in the temple. God loves that boy, Swamiji whispered, tears filling his eyes despite the number of times he'd told that story before. For his sincerity and devotion, more than all those who could recite the prayers perfectly, but whose minds were at the office or in the shopping center. So I made up my own mantra. I love you, Krishna. I love you, Krishna, I chanted, carefully turning the beads of the Rudraksha mala I'd received, along with members of Jacqueline's group of Americans, my first month at the ashram, nearly 2 years before. After Swamiji's talk about mantras and the power of japa, repetitive recitation, they all requested sacred mantras. They fared no better than I. Just chant whatever name of God appeals most to you, he told them. It could be Christ, it could be Adonai, it could be Buddha, it could be the word God. Don't worry, God recognizes all names. On the day of their departure, he blessed them all with a string of 108 Rudraksha beads. Not so different than this one. On the day of their departure, he blessed them all with a string of 108 Rudraksha beads. As I had become an honorary member of the group, I received one as well. I love you, Krishna. I love you, Krishna. I moved the beads one by one between my thumb and my ring finger of my right hand. One should never use the pointer finger to do japa, Swamiji explained, as he showed us in slow motion how to turn the beads of the mala, because that finger is the finger we use to scold, so we use the middle finger instead. Sure, one should not admonish God, but one should probably not flip him off either. So without telling Swamiji about my adaptation, I began turning the beads of my mala with my thumb and ring finger. It required more dexterity, but soon became automatic. For nearly 2 years I had done japa with my homemade mantra. Today I would receive a real one. I bathed and washed my hair. In India, bathing has a significance far greater than physical cleanliness. We bathe not just for physical attractiveness or to spare friends our body odor, but also to purify ourselves inside and out before approaching God. No traditional Indian would ever enter even a small temple in their home, let alone take part in the ceremony without first bathing. To bathe is to prepare oneself to encounter God. On our pilgrimages to the sacred areas of Mount Kailash and Lake Mansarovar in Tibet, I marveled at the ability of Indian women to bathe from a bucket of ice-cold water in a makeshift open-to-the-sky tent in the sub-zero temperatures of pre-dawn darkness. Not bathing was as unthinkable to them as stripping off 5 or 6 layers of thermals and woolens and pouring ice water over my naked body was to me. Finally, On the third or fourth day of unobtrusively disappearing at the time the other ladies were bathing, I went to Pujya Swamiji and confessed. "I can't do that," I said. "I will die of pneumonia. Surely God doesn't want that." "Stand here and close your eyes," he said, in yet another instance of what I discovered to be boundless compassion for those of us who had been touched by grace due not to discipline, not to austerity, not to worthiness, not even to conscious seeking, but simply due to the amazingness of grace itself. Soon I heard him chanting verses in Sanskrit. I didn't know or understand except for the word pavitra, purity. Then I felt a light drizzle of water over my head. When I opened my eyes, he was gently splashing the final drops on me. "Now go." Each day on the pilgrimage in the morning, I would come to him, bow at his feet, and receive my shower in the form of Vedic mantras and a gentle sprinkling of water from his hand, a special ritual for his only devotee who couldn't brave an ice-cold bucket bath. That particular privilege was reserved, however, for frigid Tibetan mornings. On all other days, I had to actually bathe. After taking my bath on Thanksgiving Thursday morning, I lit the oil lamp on the temple in my room and began my japa. "I love you, Krishna," I chanted, knowing that within a few short hours, that mantra would be replaced by one with true Vedic power. Krishna, of course, would still know that I loved him, but now I would have an official way of saying it. After my meditation, I put on my new sari. It was a delicate golden silk gifted to me several months earlier by a devotee of Swamiji's from Varanasi. With uncharacteristic restraint, I didn't wear it immediately, but put it away for a special occasion. The following February, in 1999, at an event with the Jain community in Singapore, I learned how silk is made, about the torture and death of the silkworms, and swore off silk forever. However, in this moment, before the Singapore trip, oblivious to the violence woven into each thread of my garment, I draped it over myself with joy. The sun rose around 6:30, and I followed the first rays of her light down to the Ganga. As I stood with my feet in Ganga's waters, the sun climbed over the Himalayas behind me, and the moon descended into the sacred river before me. How had I ended up here? "Thank you, God," I whispered. It was not, of course, an answer to the question of how this had happened, and yet it was. I would not have coffee this morning, as I needed to fast before receiving my mantra. Fasting before certain rites and rituals is not obligatory, but is recommended. It is said that in lightness of body, we are more receptive to the divine. Weighed down by food, our body is less available to subtle energies and our prana, our life force. The river of grace, as energy flowing through our physical and subtle bodies, gets diverted into the process of digestion. Hence, there's an emphasis on fasting in Hindu tradition. Fasting, though, in modern Indian culture is quite different from both the Western concept of living on water or juice and the traditional Hindu emphasis on being light and focused to sit with God. The Sanskrit word for fasting, upvas, literally means sitting near to. Near to what? Near to God. So, traditional Hindu fasting is not about dietary restrictions or health or weight loss, but about foregoing food in favor of sitting with God. As the traditional has given birth to the contemporary, fasting in India has undergone great changes. In autumn 1996, during one of my early months in the ashram, I sat in the dining room eating the regular fare of boiled yellow lentils, lightly cooked loki, a zucchini-like squash, and a dry chapati. The man next to me had a plate full of deep-fried potato pakoras and puris, fritters and fried bread, still glistening with ghee, clarified butter, and a bowl of potato stew, the surface layer of which looked like clear ocean water in which an oil tanker had spilled its cargo. He looked down at my plate and disparagingly said, "It's Ekadashi, the sacred 11th day of the month. You're not fasting?" I felt for a moment like I'd been transported to an alternate reality. Were the piles of fried goodies on his plate a hallucination? Had too many months of simple food driven me to become delusional and manifest pakoras on my own retina? No, I responded, as I could think of nothing else to say. "Mph," he retorted, and looked at me with such disdain that I felt like I was sinfully drinking wine with my meal. Halahara, essentially a diet of fruit, is the term used to describe food that is permitted on a fast in India. It can be anything that is not made with grains or legumes, and in some cases any salt other than rock salt. It is meant quite literally to be a diet of fruit, something to lightly sustain the body while one engages in deep spiritual disciplines, while one sits near to God. However, human nature is undaunted by semantics, and while necessity may be the mother of invention, hunger is the mother of rationalization. So over the years and decades, the definition of fruit has expanded and now includes a wide variety of substances that are not grains or legumes, but are also far from the raw, simple, juicy nectar blossoming on trees and bushes. There is now palhara dough for pizzas, palhara batter for dipping and frying pakoras, and palhara flour from which to make fried puris, all of which counts as fasting. But this morning, about to receive my mantra, I really fasted. No fruit, no coffee, only water. However, given that I was meeting Pujya Swamiji at 7 in the morning, my abstinence was not, it must be noted, that impressive a feat. I sat on the cool marble steps and closed my eyes into the wind. It blew from the tops of the Himalayas into the valley through which Ganga flows and across the rushing waters onto my face. The sun rises out over the mountains to the east of the ashram. So in winter, it's mid-morning before any rays fall onto the river. I sat in the first light of dawn as the dew of the pine trees mingled with the wet mist rising over Ganga and anointed my closed eyes and bare cheeks. In other months, the banks are filled with families bathing, splashing themselves and each other with exuberant cries of Jaya Gange, Jaya Gange, Jaya Gange. Children run and play, followed closely by their parents' reprimands. Priests gather the devoted and offer prayers for health, happiness, and prosperity. In winter, though, Indians tend to stay away from the mountains. I looked up at the clock tower that sits on Paramarth's marble platform, lining Ganga's banks. It is a landmark that has been there since the 1950s, decades before any of the shops, restaurants, or cyber cafes mushroomed along the riverside. The clock said 6:45. All right, I hope you're listening. Here it is. The ritual to receive a mantra. I bowed down onto the chilly marble platform lining the banks of Ganga. Through my shawl I could feel the chill on my chest and belly. I stretched out my arms, palms down on the slightly damp stone, pressed my nose and forehead onto the hut, and prayed, "Thank you, God. Thank you. Please make me worthy. Make me worthy of this place, worthy of your presence in my life. Make me divine." I raised my head and let my gaze merge with the rushing river. The wind reached into my unblinking eyes and brought forth tears. I rose, smoothed my now faintly wrinkled, slightly damp sari, and walked up the steps into the gates of the ashram. The sun appeared in the dip between mountain ranges and was beginning to fall on the benches that line the central ashram pathway. I walked past the hand pump and gave it a slight bow. I pass it several times a day, oblivious to our special history. If you remember at the beginning of our book, she walked past this when she was just staying at a nearby hotel, oblivious to the ashram. But today, I remember that it was here, just next to the hand pump, where the very ground had reached up and grabbed my feet. I smiled at the hand pump as though it were an animate, conscious co-conspirator in God's plan for me to live here. I had to find an offered flower, one that had of its own accord fallen from a vine and landed softly on the earth, still fresh and beautiful. God does not like us to pick flowers, Swamiji explained. He put them on the vines and trees for a reason. We must leave them there. I scoured the flower gardens along the central walkway until I found the perfect one. A pink blossom with large soft petals that seemed to have floated to the dirt effortlessly. Its petals still perfectly curved with no tears or frays. I bent over the top of the bench to reach into the dirt and carefully scoop it up. There wasn't a speck of mud on it, and it seemed to have fallen from the vine just moments before, fresh and moist with morning dew. I opened the screen door leading to the room where Pujya Swamiji gave daily darshan and sat on the thin orange carpet. My sari and petticoat beneath it prevented me from doing Baddha Konasana or other yoga postures while I waited. So I just sat cross-legged, my back against the wall the darshan room shares with Pujya Swamiji's meeting room, drawn to the place closest to his energy. A short while later, the magic middle door opened, and, rather than the young boy who usually appeared, Swamiji stood above me. I jumped up, then dove down to bow at his feet. "Come," he said, and led me through his sitting room into his personal prayer room. The room was sparse, with a low bed in the center. A long sheepskin rug ran parallel to the bed. "I usually sleep on that," he explained. "I like to be closer to the mother." A few feet from the rug was his temple. He had brought me here once before, in December 1996, on the day before I had to leave India and go back to school to seek the Mother Goddess's blessings for a safe journey and a fast return. "Why?" I asked her repeatedly. "Why bother sending me back with your blessings for a safe and quick journey when I'm already here, safely? Why not just keep me here?" Now I was back at his temple. A large ornate image of Ma sits in the center, with images of Bhagavan Krishna on both sides. In front of the temple, on the floor, is another, smaller sheepskin. Pujya Swamiji sat on that. "Sit down," he gestured. There was a thin, square mat on the ground next to his sheepskin. "Sit on that," he said. I sat slowly, careful not to show my feet to Ma in the temple. I crossed my legs under my sari and folded my hands in my lap, still holding my pink flower. "Give the flower to Ma," Pujya Swamiji instructed. I placed a flower on the base of the temple, next to the silver oil lamp with a thin cotton wick burning in it, casting the only light on the other room other than faint rays of sun coming through the blinds of the adjacent room. Pujya Swamiji began to chant Vedic mantras. I closed my eyes and held my palms against each other in front of my heart. Oh God, how am I here? The divine craziness of it all washed over me, and I smiled into the sound of the prayers. Although I didn't know the mantras or understood the words as Swamiji chanted them softly, I could feel them resonating in my own head. They had a physical presence, not just the vibration of sound waves. Each word, each phrase appeared in my mind as he chanted, as though he were literally blowing the words through my ear into my brain. After a few minutes, he said, "Okay, now I will give you your mantra. Repeat each word after me." I whispered. A mantra given by the Guru is never supposed to be shared. It is said that the spiritual power gets diluted if the formula is spoken aloud to others. The mantra's Shakti, energy, is maintained when it exists as a cord between the Guru and disciple. For this reason, I won't share the actual words of the mantra he gave me, only that it, like all mantras, begin with Om. He chanted slowly, careful to enunciate so I could repeat it without a mistake. I felt each word resonate inside the cells of my brain. This was more than an experience of tiny hairs on my ear canal vibrating with the frequency of the sounds he made, bouncing off my tympanic membrane and getting relayed through the inner ear into the temporal lobes of my brain. He was not merely speaking these words, he was placing them, one after the other, into the crevices within my brain matter, weaving them into the web of neurons with their axons and dendrites, wrapping each word up in the nerve fibers along with consciousness it carried. After he placed the mantra in my brain, he reached over to the image of Gayatri Ma, touched both her feet, and then touched the top of my head. Like a soldering iron, he burned the mantra into place, the energy pouring from his hand through my skull and into the electric wiring of who I am. The stuff that held me together chemically and electrically within the cushion of my skull had been reset. It was as though all the neurons had dumped all their neurotransmitters into my synapses simultaneously. My brain felt like a swirling pool of energy. The ability to open my eyes, to move, or to speak was gone. I heard Pujya Swamiji rise and felt the slight shift in the air as his dhoti brushed over the sheepskin carpet next to me. I have no idea how long I sat in the pool of my own mind matter at his temple. The mantra seemed to be the only solid, stable presence. Slowly, my neurons managed to regather their chemicals and realign themselves for normal functioning. I was again aware of my breathing and opened my eyes. I rose from the temple and went through Swamiji's empty sitting room, through the daily darshan room, back into the ashram courtyard, and into the rising rays of the sun. My mantra chanted itself. Since that day, my mantra has been a rope that carries me into a state, an experience of presence and truth. I chanted on my prayer beads each morning and evening, and during the day whenever I have free hands. When I feel myself getting stressed or upset, I reach for it, hold on for dear life as though I were drowning, and it was my life raft. Most of the time, it runs in the background of my consciousness, an anchor connecting me to the depths of my existence. Thank you for listening. We'll pause our reading of the Hollywood to the Himalayas there for now. So, our dear author has received her mantra, one so secret she cannot share with us. But maybe, just maybe, we'll get a flavor for it at the end of today's Sangha when we chant a mantra ourselves. Next time we'll read chapter 34, Gallstones, the miracle of Ayurvedic medicine. Namaste.